the New World Order is a corporate takeover. And they've got their corporate takeover artist, Panetta from the CIA, former director with, files on all these people, most of it made up crap, and hit teams. Most of the Congress is corrupt, and he thinks he can just barrel in there and say, hey, shut up. You work for us now. You understand that? I mean, my God. He says, oh, NATO and the UN, which now have run the euro and are enslaving them. It's global domination by a bunch of crooked corporations who want to take all our property, who want to break up our families, who want to force prescription drugs on us. They're a bunch of wild out. They are the worst wannabe dictators I've ever seen in history. Okay? I mean, these people are out of control. And it's not like you can have Operation Valkyrie like the Germans did trying to kill Hitler. It's not like there's one bastard son of a bitch who's got to be dealt with. It's a whole crew of crooks that set up a giant, unconstitutional, global, out-of-control system. They exempt themselves from all the laws. It's too complex for the average person to get. And so they just get away with murder, but they may have gone too far, waddling in to those corrupt senators who at least want their power. And that's where the founders were geniuses, separation of powers. They knew that the Congress would be jealous of its power with the president. That's why there's checks and balances on the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive. And the biggest check is us. But let me tell you, I've never seen anything like this. They usually build world government, unconstitutional military operations quietly. But I hate to use this on a family show, but it's all it is. It's like when a dog goes and pees on a smaller dog. I mean, basically, Panetta just stood up and urinated all over the Congress and said, you don't count. I go to the UN. I go to the World Trade Organization. I go to the IMF. I go to the World Bank. I go to NATO, which is a totally private corporate consortium run by central banks. So you got a central bank operative, just like Romney and Obama, all of them paid for, in there with a straight face going, no, I don't come to you, because the bankers want our 50,000 nukes. They want our weapons. They want everything. They want to occupy our country. They got the TSA out there training us that they can grab our genitals. I mean, it's an outrageous tyranny. And do not say you weren't warned. Okay. Let me give you a little bit of background on this. Obama to Boner, Speaker of the House, Boner, on Libya. The UN gave us the okay. Remember, this is how the Washington Times. Again, we've got copies of the letter where Obama said it's his right to do all of this. But I want to shift gears. You remember last year when they launched the peace bombing of Libya, which was admitted now to be a plan to destabilize all of Africa. You remember Obama? He said on record, I don't need Congress or anybody else. I've got the UN. I can attack whoever I want because it's peace bombs. Here's a clip.
Today, in his press conference, the president made clear that he believes the law does allow him to make this commitment on his own. Listen to this for a moment, if you would.
I'm not a Supreme Court justice, so I'm not going to put my constitutional law professor hat on here. Do I think that our actions in any way violate the War Powers Resolution? The answer is no. So I don't even have to get to the constitutional question.
Simply, sir, what's your reaction?
That's a horrible statement.
Well, not if you're a tyrant. And now you got the Secretary of Defense telling Congress, you don't run jack squat. We don't ask for nothing. We got the UN, buddy. Incredible. There's a new boogeyman, Joseph Kony, worse than Iraqi WMDs. Give up all your rights. Launch big wars. It's peace.
Whether or not we would want to get permission from the Congress, I think those are issues we would have to discuss as we decide what to do here.
Well, I'm almost breathless about that, because what I heard you say is we're going to seek international approval, and then we'll come and tell the Congress what we might do, and we might seek congressional approval.
Oh, special forces attacks.
Put my constitutional law professor hat on here. Do I think that our actions in any way violate the War Powers Resolution? The answer is no. So I don't even have to get to the constitutional question.
Simply, sir, what's your reaction?
That's a horrible statement.
and he's got a Odinga Islamic Alliance to crush the Christians in Kenya, but this also reaches into Ethiopia, it reaches into Uganda, Congo, Tanzania, and a whole bunch of other countries in that region. So all of Africa is a battlefield in flames between the US and the Chinese, with Obama leading the charge to kick the Chinese out.
Well, in the last 3 days, I've seen 37 million views of Kony 2012. And everybody's saying, man, Alex, you got to get behind a war, an invasion in the middle of Africa. I mean, after all, the children are being enslaved. And there's a group called Invisible Children that wants to have a military invasion against Joseph Kony, who I've researched for years, there in Uganda. Well, there's a problem here. I've looked into Joseph Kony years ago. He's obviously another warmonger, bad guy. But the actual president of Uganda has been involved in genocides of over 7 million people. And best I can tell, Joseph Kony might have a couple thousand followers, 200 to 400, max 500 soldiers. Maybe 100,000 they've killed in a couple decades. I mean, the point is, he's like Saddam beat the brains out of babies in incubators in Kuwait. They admit that's PR, wasn't true. Or they've got this Syrian guy who they're saying there's all these massacres. That's now admitted to be fake. Or you've got the claim that Gaddafi's people were racing around, raping women fueled by Viagra. Wasn't true. And they admit that 40,000 plus people are dead, including most of them black Africans in Libya, and that they're using al-Qaeda there. And in Syria, the West doesn't want to bring liberty to Syria. They want to destabilize that country and use al-Qaeda to do it. This is all on record. And I know about Rwanda. I know about the Hutus and the Tutsis. I know about what's happening in Uganda. I've researched this. And I predicted with my guests and researchers in the Obama deception 3.5 years ago that they would invade Libya, that they would invade Uganda, that they would go after all of these different organizations. And that has now happened. That has now happened with the Lord's Resistance Army, all of it. They sent in special forces last year trying to kill them. So remember, when the West and the corrupt interests that run this country say they want to invade an area to stop a human rights disaster, I have examples from just last year in the Ivory Coast of Africa, where they admit that the UN killed tens of thousands of people to overthrow the elected government there in the Ivory Coast. So we've seen this over and over again. Just last April, close to a year ago, the UN on record was backing rebels attacking the government and killing tens of thousands, mainly Christians. But don't worry, the BBC said the UN would investigate that. And then Obama launched his own attack in Uganda, in Central Africa. My point is, the people controlling our society could care less about human rights events or violations or genocide. In fact, they're funding it. And when I saw the group Invisible Children with all these movie stars and all these groups come out with basically a pro-war, pro-invasion call, and their film got 37 million views in just 3 or 4 days, and I saw the State Department behind it and all this propaganda and members of Congress pushing it, I knew that something was going on. Just like the babies in the incubators, all of it. This has nothing to do with actually trying to help people there. Am I saying that the group they want to fight is good? No. But what I'm saying is we hear about this 2012 movement against Kony, and it's nothing but using him as a convenient boogeyman when he's a minor player in the overall larger system as a pretext to invade these countries. And I've had young people, a lot of my young listeners, who are waking up but are still somewhat naive. They're being shown this in public school. They're calling me. They're saying, they're hurting children. They're enslaving children. We've got to get behind war. And the biggest issue here is the system is using the foundation-controlled left and the normal avenues that are promoting anti-war now as a pro-war activism and a pro-war hysteria, and that's what this is, and it's being promoted by the system to invade and take over Central Africa and also invade out of Libya and North Africa. African. All of this was predicted in my film released 3.5 years ago, The Obama Deception. Let's go ahead and go to a clip of that before we go to Webster Tarpley.
Obama basically does a couple of things. One is, again, this idea, kick the Chinese out of Africa, kick them out of Sudan where they get oil, kick them out of Zimbabwe where they get raw materials, start a civil war in Congo, another big source of raw materials. Al-Qaeda, an arm of the U.S. intelligence community, is now active in Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco. You've got a destabilization going on in Kenya around Odinga. That's Obama's cousin. This is a guy who has two children. They're Obama's niece and, well, nephew in a broad sense. And one of them is named Raul, and the other one is named Winnie, after Winnie Mandela, who did the necklacing and political assassinations in South Africa. So this Odinga is essentially a CIA destabilizing operation in Kenya, and he's got a Odinga Islamic Alliance to crush the Christians in Kenya, but this also reaches into Ethiopia, it reaches into Uganda, Congo, Tanzania, and a whole bunch of other countries in that region. So all of Africa is a battlefield in flames between the U.S. and the Chinese, with Obama leading the charge to kick the Chinese out for geopolitical reasons.
Now, again, the establishment has the controlled neocon right calling for war, the controlled left, George Clooney, all of them. We've got to invade Sudan. They're attacking the Christians while the UN's actually slaughtering them. We've got to invade Uganda so they can have the Muslim groups kill the Christian groups that are rebels. There's all sorts of barbarism going on here. But I had a caller when Obama was just president-elect, before he was even in office in January of 2009, who called in and broke it all down, that Obama is just the African face on this neo-colonial imperialism. Again, I want to stop genocide. I'm for the little guy. But when I see a big Hollywood-financed movement lecturing everyone that we've got to have an invasion and all of the regular peace groups calling for war, we know about the State Department using Twitter and Facebook. We know this is their new model, getting the swarming adolescents involved in all of this. Let's go to that clip of the caller.
They put the face of Barack Obama as part of their public relations because it's like in the old folk tales about vampires. A vampire cannot force his way into somebody's house. It's against some kind of metaphysical law. So the vampire has to persuade the resident of the household to open the door and invite him in. So they're going to look at the peephole at Barack Obama, which looks like them and appears to be on their side. They're going to say, okay, here's my ally. Let me open the door and let me let this person in. And then Barack Obama is just, of course, a front man for the American empire.